Hello and welcome to Sincerely Elvis Presley. I'm Sean. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to join me. I really appreciate it. I've called this episode Lost in Hollywood. Now that might seem an obvious kind of approach when looking at the years in the middle of the 60s and Elvis's career, but it's kind of difficult to approach it from any other angle. You know, when you start getting the information out for that 3-year period, it is very much rinse and repeat as far as the movies are concerned. I've said before about the movies and sort of quantified that, you know, I love the movies, but what I'm trying to do is remain as detached as possible and sort of look down from the top. Now, 64 to 66, you know, we get the green shoots of, you know, recovery, if you like. In May 66, Elvis goes into the studios and records material for his second spiritual gospel album, How Great Thou Art. And there are also other numbers recorded there that hint at the fact that he's gaining a renewed interest in recording material other than just pure soundtrack material. So, you know, there are green shoots of recovery, but I'm not really going to get on to those sessions until the next episode because How Great Thou Art isn't released until 67. So this episode is going to solely concentrate on the movies 64 to 66. Now, for me, I think you can sort of benchmark where the rot starts to set in a bit with Kissing Cousins. So Kissing Cousins is filmed in late 63 after Viva Las Vegas. And I think although there's then released the other way round, and Kissing Cousins actually comes out before Viva Las Vegas in 64, I think if you look at the way they were filmed chronologically, you can see the drop in quality between Viva Las Vegas and Kissing Cousins. The production values of Kissing Cousins just drop, really. You know, the plot itself is absolutely wafer thin. Some of the material, the soundtrack material definitely isn't as strong as Viva Las Vegas. And if you look at the sort of, you know, they've come up with this sort of hackney-eyed plot of Elvis coming across his identical cousin. Elvis is the one with black hair, the cousin is blonde hair. But the lack of money that's spent on that sort of cheap knock 'em out sort of film philosophy, every single time both characters appear on screen, one of them has to have their back turned, and it's blatantly a stand-in in a wig. It just looks almost comical, like some sort of cheap TV series. I don't know how else to put it, but to me it's not great. It's not a terrible film, but it's just not up to the standards. I think, you know, from Kissing Cousins onwards, the budgets get smaller, the shooting schedules get quicker. I mean, by the time we get to Harum Scarum, that film's shot in a month. In and out, gone. You know, it really is a stack 'em, pack 'em, rack 'em, and it starts to get to Elvis, and we see that in some of the things that happen. But Kissing Cousins itself, well, there's another of the tropes that appear throughout Elvis's movies, because we see Elvis in a military uniform. Now we've seen him in a military uniform, of course, in GI Blues, in Blue Hawaii. He appears in a military uniform in Kissing Cousins, and he'll appear again in a military uniform in Easy Come, Easy Go. So, you know, you get these kind of things that they keep relying on. Hawaii, obviously. But you know, this formula of Elvis movies, we put him in quite a cheerful, sunny locale. We have him surrounded by lots of girls, and there's often a love interest that isn't quite going his way, and he's got to sort of fight to win the affections of the girl of his dreams, kind of thing. There's always at least one fight sequence, usually a choreographed sequence with several people involved, so that Elvis can get to show off his karate. You know, there's these tropes that certainly throughout the mid-60s appear again and again and again. But Kissing Cousins itself, let's have a look at there's no Blu-ray of Kissing Cousins. That's not available. It is available digitally through, you know, retailers such as Amazon Prime, etc. You know, you can get it. looks okay. Could do with cleaning up, but looks okay. And as I say, it's not a terrible film, and it's not really a terrible soundtrack. Let's have a look at our soundtrack. So what have we got? I don't think there's a real sort of clunker of a song. Barefoot Ballad, with the sort of Elvis being required to overdo the kind of hillbilly vocals because he's singing it as the cousin, Jody. Not fantastic, I don't think at all. But you've got things like There's Gold in the Mountains, One Boy, Two Little Girls, Catching On Fast, a nice little song. And I say little because 1 minute 18. I mean, they did make these short, didn't they? The only thing I never understood about Catching On Fast is love may be new to you, but ooh, I'm catching on fast. But if love's new to her, then she should be the one that's catching on fast, shouldn't she? Or am I getting that wrong? If the subject of the song is the one that's catching on fast, love's new to, then they're the one that's catching on fast, not the protagonist. So that lyric's never made sense to me. Let me know in the comments if I've got that completely wrong, but I'm not sure about that one. Tender Feeling, beautiful ballad. Anyone Could Fall in Love with You is lovely. Once Is Enough, is a great song. And of course, because the songs are so short, we get padded out with a couple of cracking little bonus songs of the material recorded for the album that never was. We get Echoes of Love and It's a Long Lonely Highway. Both fantastic. So I think this is probably one of those where we start seeing the bonus songs are probably stronger than the material on the soundtrack, which is telling in itself. Somebody at RCA should have cottoned on. Hold on a minute. This non-soundtrack material's stronger, but obviously they didn't. So this is an original UK press on the Red Spot label. Now, up until this point, when I've been showing original pressings, I've been able to pull out more contemporary public domain repressings with nice coloured vinyl. And that's come to an end with this one. There's no public domain on this. And the reason for that, and it's worth sort of looking at why this material exists. So in Europe, copyright existed, the copyright of the sound record existed for 50 years up until after it was released. So in 2004, Elvis's first recordings in 1954 became free-for-all, public domain. Any record company in Europe could put them out on CD or album or vinyl, whatever they wanted, and issue them legally because copyright had expired. And this carried on until 2013. Now in 2013, that law was amended. So anything after the 1st of November 2013 that was then still in copyright got extended to 70 years after it was first issued. So you will only see public domain material going up to the 31st of October 1963. So 50 years after that, 31st of October 2013, that's when the law changed. So they could no longer issue anything past that date, but it wasn't retrospectively amended. So the stuff up until the 31st of October 1963 in Europe is still public domain and can be issued legally. But anything issued after that, after the end of October 1963, now has 70 years worth of copyright on the sound recording. So that's why you won't see things like this having any public domain releases, because they're protected, but not, they extended it for 70 years. So, that was 18 years ago. So we've now got, no, it wasn't 18 years ago. No, it wasn't. It was 12 years ago. So we've now got 8 years until that old clock starts ticking again, and unless they extend the law again. But it's a strange one, really, with this sound recording material, because really, you think about the MRS label and the way they put out the soundboards, and they're going, at the moment, they're releasing 1974. Now, the thing with the soundboards, I think because they were never actually recorded to be released, let's not forget this is just an engineer recording what's coming through the soundboard. So because they weren't actual sound recordings intended for release, I think the law's different. And I think that 50 years still only holds, because what you see with MRS is they always put them out. So at the moment they're putting 74 out. So, you know, they're 50 years there or thereabouts, I think they go. So it's different for soundboards. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But I thought I'd explain why now I'll only be able to sort of show what I've got in the collection in terms of original pressings, because I don't have any modern ones, and as you know, I don't have the FTDs of these or what have you. So there's Kissing Cousins. Now, what was the next movie to be released? Well, the next movie to make it out into the cinemas after Viva Las Vegas, which obviously comes after Kissing Cousins, is Roustabout, which had been filmed in April time in 1964. So towards the end of the year, in November, Roustabout gets released. Now, Roustabout, I think, is for me a better quality movie than Kissing Cousins. I've always had a real soft spot for Roustabout, and I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that Elvis rides a motorcycle and wears a motorcycle jacket, you know. So yeah, I was in. Let's have a look at the soundtrack, because I think that's a great cover. I think that's a fantastic cover. And what's our material on here? Now this is an early UK press. It's a red spot press, but it's not one of the very first pressings. And the reason we can tell that is because Carneytown is correct as Carneytown. The original pressings mistakenly called it Carney Time, but this one's Carneytown, so it's a slightly later pressing. But I think they did put it right and reissue the sleeves quite quickly. So do we have any? See, I don't really think there's any real. I don't think there's any real weak track. Not what I call a stinker anyway. You know, I think, and of course we know that I'm a Roustabout was also recorded, but didn't turn up from somebody's vaults until quite some time later. But at the time, Poison Ivy League, Little Egypt, Hard Knocks, I always really liked Big Love, Big Heartache. There's a Brand New Day on the Horizon, One Track Heart, Wheels on My Heels. I think it's a reasonably strong soundtrack. And what a great looking album. It's really nice. And of course the little tidbit that takes place in this movie is that Elvis insists on doing his own fight scene, and then he gets himself injured, ends up with a cut in his eye, has to have some stitches, so they have to write an accident into the script so that it can explain why he's walking around with a sort of white plaster over his eye. So yeah, what else have I got on Roustabout? Well, I've got, funny enough, I don't really have any sort of 70s repressings in the collection. I've gone for the original presses, but I was in a record store, I think in Northampton, and I think this was £4 or £5, and this is a orange label, so it's a 70s repress. So actually this would have been the version that I had growing up, and I just thought I can't leave it there because it's in such nice condition. I think it was £4-5. And because I loved this soundtrack so much when I was a youngster, I thought I'm going to get myself that. So this is really one of the only 70s reissues of original Elvis albums that I've got in the collection. Because I loved Roustabout so much, I have got a third one. Now there's going to be tons of glare on this because it's still in its shrink. But this is a later repress that came as part of a US box set. And this is on a red vinyl. And this is the sleeve more closely replicates the US release. As you'll see from the original UK, we've got RCA Victor completely different at the top, and we've got the white band around the sleeve, whereas this is the full sleeve and full on the back. So you get a sort of blue background, more prominent, whereas the UK one has got a lot of more white area in it. But yeah, really like Roustabout, still really like Roustabout. I think it's got a lot more going for it for me than Kissing Cousins. I do have the second one of these Elvis Unlimited boxes that I've got. Now, I think I showed the GI Blues one before, and this one came out directly after it. And these are the only two I have. There are about, I think, 6, maybe 7 of these. You've got Blue Hawaii, Double Trouble. There's one for the Elvis's back album, Love Me Tender. But they do require quite a bit of storage space, so I'm not particularly on the lookout for any more. But what do we get in this? Right, so it comes with a certificate. Mine is number 200 of 2000. 208, sorry, of 2000. You get a little replica of the invitation to the preview of the movie. You get a DVD. Now, the DVD is certainly nothing to get excited about. I think when I showed the GI Blues, I didn't know what was on it. I had a look at this one, didn't take me long. You get the original movie trailer and then about 30 seconds of really grainy footage of Elvis recorded at some point on the set of Roustabout. You can barely make him out, but just to stretch it out a bit, they then show the same bit of footage in slow motion. So not really anything to get excited about, to be honest. You get a 45 of radio spots, and that is exactly the same on both sides. So really, what you're paying for with this one is the book. The book's really nice. The book maintains the standards that the one I showed before for GI Blues does. So we get some great material. Interesting working title was Right This Way, Folks. So you get some nice shots there. So I wish, in some ways, I definitely wish I had more room, because I think these are nicely done, these little inside boxes from Elvis Unlimited. So I would like to get myself some more of them, but unfortunately I don't have the room. There's a nice little bit here, actually, that is worth focusing on. So this says, during the filming of Roustabout, an article appeared in the Las Vegas Desert News and Telegram on April the 20th, 1964. Elvis helped in success of Burton O'Toole movie. Would you believe that Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole owe part of their success to Elvis Presley? These two brilliant Shakespearean-trained actors who won worldwide acclaim for their performances in Beckett might not have had the opportunity to star in the picture were it not for Sir Swivelhips. Don't laugh, it's not that Elvis refused either role. See, they're so derisory of him. It refused either the role of Henry II or Beckett. No, Elvis helped finance Beckett indirectly. Producer Hal Wallace, who has produced Elvis Presley's greatest movies, also produced Beckett. Were it not for the revenue from Elvis's movies, there might not have been the wherewithal to film Beckett. And this is the quote. This is the quote from Hal Wallace. In order to do the artistic pictures, it is necessary to make the commercially successful Presley pictures. But that doesn't mean a Presley picture can't have quality too, says Wallace. At the moment, Wallace is filming Roustabout starring Elvis. This story may not be the greatest, but then O'Toole and Burton can't sing like Elvis either. Elvis was deeply hurt by this. And you hear that on the recent FTD Girl Happy sessions. There's some comment made about Hal Wallace and Elvis is none too pleased. And it was rankling because of that. Because of the fact that, yeah, the Elvis movies pay for the decent stuff. Not very good, and you can see why Elvis was hurt by that. So the next movie up after Roustabout is Girl Happy. So just as I was saying, Girl Happy, there we go. So Girl Happy, again, that is available digitally, and the digital copy from the likes of Amazon is really, really crisp. They must have cleaned that up because it looks really good. But Girl Happy, another decent movie, I'd say, you know, coming straight after Roustabout. It's a nice little it's a nice little romp, breezy, sunny. It's certainly by no means the worst of Elvis's movie. And, you know, I like Girl Happy. I think the soundtrack album has got a stunning cover. Where do we fall down? Do we think we fall down at all on the soundtrack? What have we got? So we get a bonus song, You'll Be Gone, as recorded at the sessions that didn't produce the album. I've got to Find My Baby, Puppet on a String, Do the Clam, Meanest Girl in Town, Cross My Heart, Hope to Die, Do Not Disturb, Wolf Call, Starting Tonight, Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce. That's pretty silly and doesn't really survive outside of the context of the movie. But yeah, it's a reasonably strong soundtrack, I'd say. Definitely. Now, I do have this little bootleg that came out, I'm not sure what year this one was actually. It's a Bilko release, and it is Girl Happy at the World's Fair. And what it does, it gives outtakes from the Girl Happy sessions, but also mixes it up with Happens at the World's Fair, which is a bit of a strange combination. But yeah, there's your inner booklet. In fact, really calling that a booklet's getting a bit carried away. There's your inner bit of paper. And there are the list of your tracks with the Girl Happy outtakes on it, and 2 shots from Girl Happy. Interestingly, it says coming this spring from Bilko, There's Always Me Volume 5. Now, I don't think Bilko ever released a Volume 5 of There's Always Me. I think there were only 4 in that set, so not sure what happened to that one. But yeah, I've got no date whatsoever on this, so I'm not entirely sure. But it's I'll try and look that up and stick that at the bottom of the screen. So of course, what we've got also released recently are the fantastic FTD Girl Happy sessions. Many channels have featured these. There's plenty out there on them, so I'm not going to go over them in too much detail. But what I will say is that everyone that's heaped praise upon these has done so correctly. You know, I agree with them entirely. This is really good. But you start to hear Elvis's frustration with the process, with the movies, with the material he's being given. You know, that's beginning to creep in there, and it's evident listening to these sessions. So all I'm going to do is give you a quick look. Tape boxes as ever, 3 CD slotted in. Fantastic booklet. You expect no less from FTD. The layout follows the same pattern with the tracks listed at the beginning, and then stills from time. Session data that we always get, which is really nice detail to have. Now, I just noticed something about Elvis's hair. I know, I can hear you groan. But interestingly, that release there, Girl Happy at the World's Fair, that's a Kissing Cousins shot. Because Girl Happy, he's always got the little bit dropping forward there in strands, where it's kind of, there's more of a section of it that falls over in Kissing Cousins. So they got that wrong. Shut up. There we go. I've always really liked the publicity photographs taken around the time of Girl Happy. I remember I had one of the Danilo calendars when I was young, and there were a lot of the Girl Happy shots in the different coloured shirts. So there's Girl Happy, there's the sessions, absolutely 100% recommended. Absolutely a fantastic set of sessions, you can't go wrong. Now, the next movie, Tickle Me. Tickle Me is an interesting one. So this comes from, I've taken this one from Ernst Jorgensen's and Peter Guralnick's Elvis Day by Day. But this is interesting about what Tickle Me, what was behind. So it says Elvis's next picture will be Tickle Me, to be produced for Allied artists by Ben Schwalbe and directed by Norman Taurog. Elvis will receive $750,000, more than half the total budget, and 50% of the profits. Because Allied is in financial trouble, not to mention the increasing difficulty of getting Elvis into the recording studio, the Colonel comes up with a new scheme for the soundtrack. In a letter to Elvis of this date, this is Friday the 21st of, I think, April, the Colonel suggests the idea of using in this picture 10 or 12 songs that have you have already recorded and have been released on albums in the past, but never have been released on either singles or 45s. The beauty of the scheme, the Colonel explains, is that it saves both time and money. All Elvis has to do is indicate his assent as soon as possible. Elvis's sparsely worded reply a month later reads simply, "Arrangements with records okay, Elvis." Interesting. So, yes, the studio that they'd gone to didn't have a lot of money, but it's this idea of saving money. You know, where can we cut back? Where can we cut back? So, Tickle Me didn't, because it was all material that had been out before. There was an EP. In fact, there were 2 EPs released in the UK, but it only actually got what purported to be a soundtrack album, and I guess it is the soundtrack, but obviously it hasn't been recorded for the movie, was released in South Africa. Now that commands decent money these days, and I don't have that. But what I do have is this bootleg that is a pretty accurate replica of that South African soundtrack album. And this was, I think this was produced in about 1987, if I remember rightly. And it even goes so far as reproducing the RCA Victor label. So it's an absolute facsimile of that original South African release. Now, if you look at the track list, these aren't all from Tickle Me, but you know, the first ones certainly are. And I always thought, you know, it's weird because it gives Tickle Me probably one of the strongest soundtracks any Elvis movie ever had, but it looks a bit odd to me. When I first saw it, Elvis, as he looks in Tickle Me, singing songs from an earlier few years, because his voice, I think his voice has got slightly deeper by the time he's recording the soundtracks in the mid-60s compared to 60 in the Elvis's Back album. So, I don't know, it always looked a bit odd, which is not to decry the movie. I think you've got Roustabout, you've got Girl Happy, and you've got Tickle Me. And I think you've got 3 pretty strong movies in a row. Yeah, they're not going to win Oscars. But, you know, people have said before about Tickle Me, it plays like a little bit of a Scooby-Doo, you know, and it's a bit of a, if it wasn't for those pesky kids as they reveal the ghost was a fake all along. It's got that kind of feel to it. And I agree entirely with that. And I think it's a great fun movie. So really, you end up with 3 movies in a row. Like I say, you know, they're not going to set the world afire in terms of film critics or what have you. award ceremonies and that kind of thing. But they're not bad films at all. Now, Tickle Me, we do have a Blu-ray. This is a explosive media release from Europe, if I remember rightly, Switzerland or Sweden. So it's got an alternate title of Cowboy Melody, which it would have been released in those territories, released as. But what you get with this, and this makes me laugh because this is explosive media, so it's not being released by the film company that produced it, but what you get is a nice little booklet. And I'm pretty sure I showed this when I did my Elvis on Blu-ray, but it's worth another look, because when you consider some of the actual film company releases of Blu-rays, and we'll get to Harum Scarum in a minute, you get nothing. Whereas a third-party issuer, such as this explosive media, and you get a nice little booklet. I think it sort of puts some of the big studios to shame, because that's really nice and really nicely done. So yeah, Tickle Me. The other thing that was released documenting Tickle Me is this rather nice Joe Tunzi book, Elvis in Tickle Me. Now this came with a CD of radio spots promoting Tickle Me, and you also got one of the updated calendars, like the RCA calendars that were issued in Elvis's lifetime, which Joe Tunzi did a lot of these, this being the 2008 calendar, with a Tickle Me shot on it. Now this is a nice little book documenting the film. Lots of information and photographs. Really, really lovely record of it. This one is still available if you keep your eye out. But yeah, great photographs. Incredibly squeaky. I think you can see from the stills what a fun movie this one is. It's deliberately sort of hokey, if you like, and I think it's all the better for it. It's not trying to sort of take itself too seriously. I mean, I'm sorry about the sound of opening that. I don't. Very squeaky indeed, but yeah, a bit on the black and white side, this book, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Still a nice little record to have of Tickle Me. Good stuff. So that is your Elvis in Tickle Me by J.A.T. Oh, Tickle Me in Colour, section 5. So we do get a colour bit, but it's right at the end. By the look of it, it's not very big. Yeah, I think we get a few pages, but not many. In fact, was that it? Let me get some releases. Okay, so there is Elvis in Tickle Me. Right, where do we go after Tickle Me? Well, we go to Harum Scarum. So we're now in 1965. Elvis has turned 30 in January, and he then goes to film Harum Scarum. Girl Happy eventually opens in the March. It's around the time of filming Harum Scarum that Elvis becomes involved with the Self-Realization Fellowship, which will, influence some of his thinking over the next months, certainly. It's also while filming Harum Holiday on April the 4th that Jerry Schilling buys himself a Triumph 650, and when Elvis sees it, he loves it. So he makes a call to a Triumph dealership and he basically buys all his entourage Triumphs. I don't think they all get 650s because I don't think the dealership can supply them, but they get a considerable amount. And actually this t-shirt was issued by Triumph and memorialises that event. You see that American legends Elvis and British motorcycle Triumph, King of Rock and Roll and the King of the Road, and it talks about Harum Scarum and Elvis. What's it say? During the filming of Harum Scarum, Elvis buys a fleet of Triumph 650 motorcycles, one for each of the guys. So I thought this was an apt one to wear for today's episode. So Harum Scarum. Well, you know, I don't mind the Harum Scarum soundtrack at all. This is a UK press Harum Holiday, as it was called here, but I don't mind it at all. I mean, it's got for me a bona fide classic in So Close Yet So Far from Paradise. I really like the two tracks Animal Instinct and Wisdom of the Ages that are put on here as bonus songs, but could easily have been in the film. And in fact, I think they probably were intended to be, if I remember rightly, but were dropped. But I don't think it's, you know, I know people sort of deride things like Hey Little Girl and Shake That Tambourine, but I always really liked this soundtrack when I was a kid. Now maybe that's a kid thing, I don't know, but I like the soundtrack. I don't mind the movie, but, you know, let's put that top-down lens on again. The plot is ridiculous, isn't it? Let's face it. The plot of Harum Holiday is nonsense. I don't think the average cinema goer would have gone for it. And, you know, I think this is the one that was filmed, the first one that's filmed in just a month, and it really was knocked out. Can get it on Blu-ray. This came out in the last couple of years, but there you go. This is a Warner Brothers release, and you get nothing. As we saw, That Explosive Media and Tickle Me, you get a nice little booklet. So, you know, I really think these major companies could try harder. Now, I've got a little piece here. This is quite interesting. This is also from Ernst Jorgensen and Peter Guralnick's Day by Day. But this is June the 18th. A viewing of Harum Scarum challenges even the Colonel's belief. For one of the few times in his professional association with Elvis, he gives free rein to his critical faculties, blasting the film's incoherence and seemingly doubting even his own judgment in agreeing to so hurried a production schedule. It would take a 55th cousin to P.T. Barnum to sell this picture, he declares, and maybe the best thing to do would be book it fast, get the money, then try again. He even comes up with a suggestion a month later to add a talking camel as narrator so that the ridiculousness of the presentation might at least seem intentional. You know, I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it, really, that even the Colonel thought that, you know, no one's going to buy this. It doesn't make sense. It's daft. And it's not daft for daft's sake, is it? It's just daft. As I say, I really like the film, but that's the Elvis fan in me, and I really like the soundtrack. Two different things to Elvis fans and the public at large in some ways. Now, although it's one of the weaker entries in the Elvis film catalogue, we do get a book dedicated it from JAT, Joseph A. Tunzi, and this is Elvis, Harum Scarum, the book, which is rather nice indeed. This one's quite hard to get hold of. Will turn up from time to time, but it is a little bit hard to get your hands on. But as with all JAT books, primarily a photo book, but nicely put together. There we see Elvis with those rather odd stick-on sideburns that he had in some of the shots. I think they were the shots of him as Johnny Tyrone. I think the idea was that the movie that you saw the premiere of at the beginning, Johnny Tyrone, for that movie, the character had the pointed sideburns, so we had Elvis with some stick-on sideburns, and then by the time he performs a song to the audience, they've obviously gone. So good stuff. Nice book, this one. Very nice indeed. Would I recommend this one? Yeah, I'd recommend this one. It's I love those shots. There's a few shots of Elvis taken around this particular time frame where he's looking particularly pensive. I think they're quite revealing. I often think, I wonder if that really, you know, are we getting to see inside what's going on in his head here? You know, he's got these in between takes, and he's kind of sitting there probably contemplating what am I doing? Now there's the sideburns again, so that must have been when they were about to film that sequence, the pointy sideburns. But yeah, I know there's a lot of fans have a real soft spot for Harum Scarum, Harum Holiday, and I'm one of those. I think it was one of the first movies, if I remember rightly, I purchased on VHS, because it's one I hadn't seen. I don't think I'd seen it on television, so I remember buying unless it was in the 12 Days of Elvis shortly after he passed, Christmas '77. But yeah, it's, you know, it's easy to be sniffy about them with all these years of hindsight, isn't it? But you know, they're very much a type of their own, aren't they, Elvis movies, especially ones like this. So, nice little record there of Harum Scarum. Harum Scarum, the book. What have we got on the back? Some bunch of credits. Good stuff. Well worth having. Well worth having. So, what's our next movie? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Diminishing returns, unfortunately, as well. Our next movie is Frankie and Johnny. Now, Frankie and Johnny is filmed in May '65. Tickle Me opens in July '65. And we get, eventually Frankie and Johnny opens March '66. Now, we know that was a bit of an odd choice by RCA, as they thought Elvis looked a little too round in the face. So they cut his head off and stuck a Girl Happy era head on there, which is bizarre, frankly. But yeah, I think for me, one of the weakest soundtracks of the lot. Let me know what you think in the comments. But Petunia the Gardener's Daughter, if ever there was a stinker for me, it's that. It's terrible. I think Lookout Broadway is awful. Yeah, that's. I mean, Everybody Come Aboard's not great, but you know, Come Along, yeah, it's Chessay. I mean, Whatever Woman Lives For is quite nice. Please Don't Stop Loving Me is a nice ballad. Hard Luck is nice and bluesy. Beginner's Luck's pretty. You know, I think there's a thing that no matter how weak the soundtrack is, there are usually a few gems on there. That's for sure, and that's to Elvis's credit. for being able to make the most of what was relatively mediocre material. But the weaker stuff seems to be more prevalent on things. I mean, yeah, I can't defend Petunia the Gardener's Daughter. I just can't. Is available on Blu-ray. Now this is another explosive media release. So we get a decent transfer of it. And again, putting the likes of Warner Brothers to shame, we get ourselves a booklet as well. You know, what I don't understand why the major film companies can't go to a bit of effort like this. You know, it's very, very strange. So there we go. Frankie and Johnny. So nice little booklet to come with the Blu-ray there. So Frankie and Johnny. Now, what do we get after Frankie and Johnny? Well, when the next movie that Elvis actually films after Frankie and Johnny is Paradise Hawaiian Style. Excuse the rustling, but I have to take some notes because there's no way I can keep all of this in my head. Right, so the next film that Elvis films is Paradise Hawaiian Style. Now, it's tempting to see this as the absolute low point of the movie years, and I think in some ways for me it is. It's the low point in terms of ideas, because it's like, well, you know, those movies in Hawaii did quite well. Let's put him there again. You know, that seems to be the thinking behind it. Now, you know, if ever there was a pale comparison of Blue Hawaii, a pale sort of imitation of Blue Hawaii, it's Paradise Hawaiian Style. I've spoken about the cover before. We all know what they did with the cover. It's not a contemporary shot. It's fun in Acapulco. That's insulting to Elvis. For me, by far the strongest, and I know many agree with this, the strongest song on the album is the bonus song, Sandcastles. You've got Queenie Wahine's Papaya. I don't even know what to say about that. You've got things like Dating, A Dog's Life that are really weak material, and are actually the best things about those are some of the outtakes and Elvis cracking up. We heard some of those as early as The Silver Box in 1980. But Scratch My Back, Then I'll Scratch Yours. I mean, even the, you know, the Hawaiian tinged likes of Drums of the Island, This Is My Heaven, they're just not as strong as what had gone before. I think this and Frankie and Johnny are for me the weakest soundtrack albums of them all. I think this is probably, this is a double whammy, because to me this is the weakest movie and the weakest soundtrack. It doesn't have a lot to recommend it, unfortunately. But the good point is really that this is as kind of low as it goes in terms of quality, because I think we start to pick up from there. And of course, being 1966, well, actually, you know, it's towards the end of 65 that Paradise Hawaiian Style is filmed. And, you know, while he's in the middle of that, and this is the irony, while he's in the middle of filming Paradise Hawaiian Style, the Beatles come to visit him. So, you know, that must have said something of Elvis's mentality at the time, you know, that he's getting to meet these guys that suddenly become huge, that have sort of taken some of the shine off his career, because everyone's talking about the Beatles and there's all those daft signs held at the airport, Elvis is dead, long live the Beatles, and all that rubbish. But, you know, he's obviously seen that reaction, he's seen that happening, and there he's meeting them, and he's just basically in the middle of filming what he has to know is a really poor quality movie with a pretty poor quality soundtrack. So you know, what he must have thought. And it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of him, and because he must have been thinking to himself, you know, because he knows he's locked into these contracts. Is this it? Is this the rest of my career? Is this all I'm gonna do now for forever and ever and a day? Is just record these movies and these soundtracks. Now, unfortunately, sorry, we know that he picks up, because in May '66 he goes back into the studio, as I said at the beginning, and he records How Great Thou Art, the material for How Great Thou Art, and some other tracks besides that aren't soundtrack related. So there are those green shoots, and that's why I kind of I thought it was worth putting these together, because I couldn't really see how I could do them separately these years, because it's movie. But, you know, we end on a positive note. You know, things start to change. Elvis's mentality starts to change. Unfortunately, for some time, the movies won't change dramatically, but there will be a change in feel. I think we've gone to that low point, and the only way is up now. So, yeah, I think that's probably a good place to finish this one, on a positive note. It's tricky, isn't it? It's tricky because you fall into all the old cliches, all the movies and that, and it's hard not to. When you're sitting and looking through stuff and looking through what happened, it's so hard not to sort of see so many wasted chances and wasted years. But it is what it is, isn't it? You know, the fans loved the movies. The fans across the world got to see Elvis, and they got to see him on the big screen, and that was a great thing. And as I say, you know, we know that the green shoots of the comeback really start in 1966. Now, it takes a while for that to take hold and really go somewhere, but those shoots are definitely there. So let me know what you think. You know, if there's any movies I've been dismissive of, like Paradise and Wine Style, and that's one of your favourite movies, then I am sorry. I don't do that lightly, because I've said before, I love Elvis's movies, but I think, you know, it's difficult. There's so many of them, and you can't like them all in equal measure, and you have to, if you watch them back to back, it's hard not to see the shift in quality and what sort of changes. But as ever, thank you so much for spending time watching this today. I really do appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to watch the videos. Next time, I think I'm going to do, we're kind of out of 66-ish, because the next movie that's released, so Paradise of Wine Style, is released in cinemas in July 66. Let's just have a look at these here notes. So the next film to open is at the end of 66, which is Spin Out. So I think we'll take a look at Spin Out and everything that goes after that, and I'll probably do a sort of 67 to 68 episode next time. But thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope nobody was offended by me being less than complimentary about some of the movies, because I hope you understand the intent behind it. Until next week, have yourselves a great week. Take care, everyone. Ta-da.
We'll meet you again. May God bless you. Adios.